If you've ever asked yourself how to create a pitch deck for startups, then this video is for you. My name's Alysha Randall. I'm a fractional CFO and also a founder of Fast Growth Consulting. And today I wanted to go through exactly what you need to do to prepare your investor deck. And it's a way in which the investors will really understand your business, what you're trying to do, and the finance piece also will go through what you should be including just in the pitch. So the goal of the pitch deck really is it's more than just a presentation and 20,000 slides that you want to go through. Instead, it's how your investor can understand your business. So you really want to make sure that you explain your business really simply, and clarity is more important than hype, and honesty is more important than perfection. I will see that you definitely want to keep the presentation as short as possible, say 10 to 15 slides, 10 if you can, and therefore you want to make it as succinct as possible so any additional information can stay out. Investors spend about 3 to 3.5 minutes on a pitch deck. They receive tons of pitch decks. They cannot sit and go through reams and reams of text. They also want to understand your business quickly. So I have spoken to an investor before. He was an EIS investor. He's invested in many early stage businesses, and one of his biggest complaints, particularly now because a lot of new investors or new startups that are starting around sustainability and science and sustainability or AI. Now, these investors are not experienced in these two areas. They may be, but a lot of them aren't. And therefore, at the end of a presentation, they don't actually know what the company even does. So I cannot stress that clarity and simplicity is one of the most important things. So make sure that you adopt there's a book written on it called the Mum Test. So if everyone, if your mum and your friend's mum, your partner's mum can understand, or dad can understand exactly what your business does by looking at your pitch deck, then you've passed that test. So make sure you have that at the back of your mind. I do have a pitch deck template that we will go through today. I found actually one in Canva that I quite liked. So I've used some of the slides that were in this template. I am going to say that, but of course I've changed a few things and put in my own feelings and thoughts. So I've just wanted to caveat that some of these, if you have played around in Canva before at templates, then there's certainly plenty from there. And you may recognize this, but as I said, there's quite a few things in here that I have added. But Canva is certainly a great tool to start with when putting your pitch deck together. But of course, you want it to be your brand, your feeling, your colors, your logos, what have you. But besides from that, these are the slide by slide recommendations that I would have. Of course, take this with a grain of salt, but this is just what I have seen work really nicely. So you probably don't need this slide, so you can ignore this one. So the first one is your company and your story in one sentence. So if you have a tag that really says your company exactly as it should. So for Fast Growth Consulting, for example, our tag is your startup finance teams. So it clearly says, we are a finance team for your startup. We're outsourced, but essentially we have fractional CFOs, bookkeepers, financial controllers, whatever you need, tax accountants. So that is a very good way. If your tag doesn't quite explain it, then you may just want one other sentence that explains what the company, but that should essentially be your front page, your company, maybe your logo, your story in one sentence if you can, or your tag plus an additional one sentence. So very quickly, the investor knows before you've even started talking, or before they've even started reading, because usually they'll be reading it on their computer, they immediately can see who you are and what you stand for. The next one is problem. So I know I've actually attended quite a few things whereby there's a bit of a different order suggestion. Some people like problem straight up, some people don't. I don't think it matters. You do what feels right for you. I think problems best first, particularly if you've got this as a starting point. So immediately it's, oh, this company does this. Okay, great. All right, let's get into the details. So this is part of the Canva template, I will confess, but I really like what it's saying here. Whether you do these 3 little pieces as well at the bottom depends. I'm going to say investor, and me personally, I also get sent quite a few pitch decks just so that I can give my feedback. I'd probably just read this first paragraph, the stuff in the main, and then kind of not really skim over this bit. So make sure this paragraph is really succinct. If you can do a chart or a graphic or anything that's visual rather than some generic thing, then I would absolutely do that. This kind of template is assuming it's a sustainability company, but if you can do a really nice picture, then go with that rather than text. You do want both. Some investors probably like reading text more than pictures, but in my opinion and my personal preference, not, majority will be pictures. So do both, and then clearly state the problem that your company is basically solving. So start with the problem, and then you come in with the solution. So again, if you can have a picture of the solution, so if this, in this instance, you've got melting ice and the solution is wind farms. So that's a perfect example of how you could use pictures. But essentially you want to use a picture. If you actually have a product, maybe it's a picture of the product, or it's a picture of the solution, or a picture of a customer enjoying your solution, or the end state that you're trying to achieve. So put in your solution, make it very clear, make it very simple and easy to understand. The fancy big words, the jargon, trying to prove yourself because you've got a PhD, it's not going to work in a pitch deck. You want it to be very clear and succinct. Then you want the market size. So the reason why I like market size next, and again, you can change it around, but the reason why I like market size next is because you are looking for investors to get excited about the growth opportunity of your business. So most EIS and venture capitalist investors want to sell their shares in the future for 5x, 10x of what they purchased them. And the only way they're going to do that is if your company grows 10x plus. And so you want to say, okay, this is a problem that the world has. This is the solution that we have to solve the problem. The amount of people that have this problem and therefore potential customers is huge because blah, 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 blah. So any research that you've done that should have done before you put your pitch deck together, all that research should be here. It shouldn't be generic. It should be very specific. So, if you're trying to say, for example, your customer is, I don't know, I'll use myself an example, as a 40-year-old woman who is working, has children, and lives in London. Okay, how many of us are there? And that's how big your market size is. Could you potentially sell it overseas? But, so you really need to narrow down who your customers are and then work out how many of them there are, basically. And then ideally you want it as big as possible. If it's really small and too niche, maybe this isn't the right business offering for huge investors, but ideally you want market size to be quite big. You can put in a product overview then. This would be an additional slide that I would say. But if you want to demonstrate what that looks like, or you have a couple of products, so maybe you have, say, if you're a SaaS business, you might have a core product and then a couple of additional offerings that have high profitability, then you may want to highlight those. The next thing is comparing yourself to competitors. I don't think you should ignore competitors because you're scared of being compared. I am telling you now, sophisticated investors will already be doing this, so it's better that you're upfront about it. And I find that this is a lovely way of explaining why you're better than your competitors. So ideally you should have a few more benefits and maybe a couple more competitors, but this is an example that I whipped up that you can see that you're ticking all of these boxes and competitor A, B, C, and D can't. And you essentially want these benefits to be quite material. So make sure they kind of align with your solution and the problem. So think about the problem and the solution, and then the benefits that you have that your company has and no other competitor has, because you want them to believe in your solution rather than somebody else's. Then we get into a bit more numbers, so business model and unit economics. So either you are explaining the unit economics before you, if you're pre-revenue, you're explaining what the unit economics you believe to be. And then, so it's your go-to-market strategy essentially, but the go-to-market element of the unit economics and the business model, or you're already trading and you already know what this is. So I think the business model should be explaining how do you make money, basically. How do you make money? I have definitely seen pitch decks where it's not clear on how they make money. There's lots of solutions, but how are they actually making money and who are their clients or customers? So you should be very clear on how do you make money, who your customers are, and how they're going to pay for things. Is it a subscription model? Is it a one-off model? Is it an annual charge? Is it, whatever it is. So make sure you're very clear on that. I put in just a very rough unit economics table here. You probably wouldn't show this much information. So the cost, you might probably just see this, show the subtitle. So your revenue per customer, for example, if you have just the one product, then you'd say your margins is 54% of the 140. And then you have your CAC, which is how much it costs to acquire the company. So your marketing essentially, and then the return on your sales. So for every single customer, you make 41%. So I did put in more details on what I would recommend the pitch deck, just so that it's easy for you to see how I came up with that calculation. And then again, within that, you have your CAC and your LTV. Again, if you have been trading, you will have these. If you need further explanation, I will leave that below. But essentially, if you can show your LTV, your lifetime value, and your CAC, cost of acquisition costs, then you should be showing that as well. So in here again, it's either company traction. So that means this is how much we've grown to date, and you want to show either your CAGR or some other kind of metrics that can demonstrate that. It could also be testimonials. So if you are B2B in particular, you might want to put all the brand logos that you are working with, particularly if they're well-known B2B companies, and then some testimonials. This is just the default that was in the Canva template. So in this instance, it's got a chart and some percentages. That's another good way of showing traction, but I just wanted to let you know there are multiple ways of showing it. Or if you're pre-revenue, you might want to do a go-to-market strategy again. So it would be whether it is, these is the tests that we have done. We have spoken to these people, and these people we've tested. These people, maybe you've even done an MVP. Whatever it is, it's clearly demonstrating that people like your product or service. That's the point of this, is people like what we're doing. So either you've tested it and you know that the tests are coming out great, so let's go, or you've gone to market already and people are loving what you're doing. If you already have product market fit, this is where you want to show it. If you're at seed round, by Series A, it's assumed you've already got product market fit. But at that earlier stages, it's why does anyone want to buy your product? And this is your opportunity to show that people actually do. The next one, I was playing around with this, and you can see I've got two of me in there. I think because I wanted to put in the CEO, CFO, COO, and CTO of Fast Growth Consulting, and then I realized actually that's me. I'm all for it at the moment. I'm looking for a COO, but I haven't got one yet. And a CTO, I have a third party. I didn't want to put his head in. So these two just came from the template. But I did want to go through this very specifically. I think it's very important that you demonstrate that you and your team are trustworthy, because the reasons why I have seen people not invest is because they're not sure that the team has the skills and the experience that they need to in order to deliver what they say they're going to deliver. So whether it is a detailed explanation, well, not detailed, high level reasons as to what their qualifications are and their experience, those two things. So for me, for example, I would say I'm a qualified accountant, a CPA. I have experience of working on early stage to exit in my corporate career, Love Film to Amazon, and then Funding Circle IPO, and then I've been running Fast Growth Consulting since 2019. So that kind of shows my experience and why you should trust me as a CFO, for example. So very much need to do the same thing with your team. And if you are very early stage, then include your advisors that you have. For me, personally, I have featured in people's pitch deck because I am a fractional CFO for their company, and so they've put my name down in their deck. Even though I'm not an employee, I'm an advisor, so it's worthwhile keeping that in there. So you want to develop the trust from the investors. Then financials and forecasts. So you don't want to be putting in pages and pages and pages and pages of numbers. The P&L, profit and loss, the balance sheet, the cash flow, the forecast model, all of those things are in the second stage. So all of those things have to be ready. You have to have your management accounts, actuals ready, and your forecasts ready. But you just want to put in a couple of highlights that support what you're doing in the pitch deck. You don't want reams and reams and reams of number. There are two charts that I put up that is a perfect example. Investors are interested in growth and return on investment. So if there is a way that you can demonstrate that, then this is a good way of doing it. So work out what really demonstrates growth and return on investment. Two obvious ones are revenue and profitability. So if you are going to be able to break even in the next couple of years, I would include that. If you're not, I would include something else. So whether it's margin improvement, whether it is customer numbers, whatever it is, just think about things that really demonstrate the growth and return on investment. So here's two examples. And then finally, I've put this one in. This wasn't in the template, but is very important. You want to let investors know what the total raise is. So they will potentially may know how much they are willing to invest in a business like yours. So either they're going to be the lead investor and do a majority or at least half of how much you're wanting, or a small amount, or the full amount. So you definitely need to know how big the raise is or how much you're hoping to raise in the fundraise that you're currently doing. And then you also want to explain what you're going to be spending that money on. So a percentage pie chart is fine. It is definitely worth saying that all this needs to, again, align with everything. So if you are talking about you want to move internationally, if you're talking about spending money and developing the product, if you are talking about investing in sales and marketing, then you need to make sure that your use of funds and what you're planning on doing and your goals, they all align. So that is a template that I would recommend. I must say the biggest red flags is too complicated, not enough on the team so that they don't learn how to trust you, and also that it doesn't all match up. So you have a forecast that says one thing, use of funds that says something else, your goals for the business says something else. Make sure everything is aligned and is coherent. That is really, really important with a pitch deck. And some common mistakes is that there's no data, there's no charts, there's no source of data either, particularly with your market, the size of your market. There is way too many words, and even worse, some jargon or buzzwords if you prefer. So it's hard to understand what it's talking about, and there's just pages and pages and pages and pages of words. It's been a bit over designed. Your designers have got a bit too excited. You want it to be quite like pretty, of course, but you just don't want it to be over designed. And you also don't want inconsistent numbers. So if you say in finance you're going to have this type of revenue by this, you don't want to have a different number on a different slide. Investors will pick up on that so fast that you're going to regret it. So make sure you really check that in your pitch deck. You really just want clarity and consistency and simplicity. So if you do have text, bullet points if you can with your key takeaways, and then as many pictures and charts as possible, not too many so that it's all over the place, but also the charts, as you saw the ones that I put in there, the charts and the tables, are very easy to read. You don't want a chart that has a couple of lines and then a bars and then and then a trend line all on the one chart. It's too confusing. You just want one takeaway per chart, two at most, but ideally one. So make sure that all of your charts are really easy to do. So creating a pitch deck that is both investor credible and financially grounded, it's not just about being really fancy and clever. It's rather about being really clear and consistent, which also demonstrates how clever you are. So if you are preparing to fundraise and you want to see how prepared you are, then I do have a Are You Investor Ready quiz. It takes about 5 minutes. We'll leave a link to that below, and then whatever your result is, we then share additional resources that you can take a look at to help you with your fundraise. So that's everything from today. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to click on subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.